All righty, boys and girls, welcome back to the Red, White, Claret, and Blue Show with your hosts, Alex and Chris Han Solo Condit, your American villain voices, and as always, serving up the lukewarmiest of lukewarm opinions. Ignore the fact that Chris drinks ice cold water. Go follow the socials linked in the show notes, Apple, Amazon Music, YouTube. Go check out, as we've said repeatedly the past couple episodes, our interview with Paul Faulkner and Doug Wright, MBE. Shouts out to the For the Love of Paul McGraw podcast for boosting that as well. Love you, Neil. May or may not be making a guest appearance here as well, so stay tuned for that coming forward. Further updates on the heretofore named contest to be put up on our socials in early February. I've got a lot of legal work to do on that one. And more importantly, I am going abroad to the great nation of Japan to go snowboarding for the next 2 weeks. So Chris will be alone here. Please make him feel loved. Please keep tuning in. Please do not be too mean in the comments, and don't miss me too much. We will, if he back together and actually emails anybody, maybe have a guest appearance or two, but until now, me to set everything up.
You emailed one. You emailed one. What, like, I will talk to a few other folks, but come on.
I set up one play date for you. I suggested 2 more, and you have yet to call your friends.
That's true. Wait, what were the 2 you suggested? I don't remember that. I only remember the one.
We'll need to talk about it after the episode.
All right.
No one needs to hear us bicker like an old married couple.
That's fine.
Or maybe they do love that. Who knows? Chris, how are you doing? You made it.
I'm doing great. I'm a little tired. I was traveling for work, and that always takes a little extra out of you. But and it was very cold up north where I was. It was single digits and snowy, so not a lot of fun, but otherwise great. And we got a good result today. Not the best game I've ever seen, but 3 points is 3 points. So I'm happy, and here we are. How about you?
Hey, you know what? I'm ecstatic, dude. I'm going to Japan in less than 36 hours. In exactly 36 hours, I will be about to take off in Minneapolis. So nice. Hooray for me. And honestly, that's all I'm thinking about right now. We've got a lot to talk about on the Villa front. I'm not going to lie and say that I'll be waking up at 2 a.m. to watch Champions League games. There's too much to walk around and see. But got a lot of train rides, Chris, so I'll be catching up on you, making sure you're doing your job while I'm gone.
Sounds good. That works for me.
Well, you know who also did their job today, Chris, is Aston effing Villa.
Nice.
Pulled out 1-0 victors over Everton. We'll talk about the setup and approach. Honestly, 2 things here. No Bailey at all. No John Duran at all, but he did make the bench. Onana into midfield, so we had that 3 that we kind of talked about. Rogers on the right, Ramsey left, as we said before. Unai does not want to move Ramsey from that left midfield role. And then, honestly, the biggest thing that I noticed throughout the entire match was that from minute 1, we were building up a little differently than we have in the past. So, or I guess I would say it's a throwback to last year, which was Kamara dropping into a back 3 when we ultimately had possession and could build up slowly. Yori actually coming out of the 10 spot to make the 2 in midfield. Rogers rolling center and Cash going up. So essentially creating what you would see with a back 3 formation, Cash wide right, and then Luka Dean wide left. And I thought that was really interesting, effective at times, but what it did do that I still don't love is it moved Morgan Rogers to the middle, where he is more liable to create turnovers that ultimately wind up turning into counterattacks the other way. And you did see this a couple times. Everton's best opportunities came when their press was able to turn us over far up the pitch. But hey, end of the day, it worked. Kept Rogers central enough to make that pass to Ollie Watkins. And so you can't complain about it too much. But it was an interesting tactical wrinkle that we saw, which we might see more going forward if Unai does want to persist with an Onana Kamara midfield too.
Yeah, I mean, the way they set up, it makes sense to work that way. And they did give up a handful of chances, like you'd mentioned, mostly off of turnovers high up the pitch. Like you said, the Everton press, I thought, was particularly effective in the early going, middle of the first half, about the 20 to 35 minute mark or so. I thought they did a nice job of preventing Aston Villa from really breaking that pass. It seemed, and I think they may have even said it on the broadcast, it seemed as though Villa were like one pass away from really breaking the press down, but Everton's ability to shut that passing lane down and force a turnover or force a pass back or something like that, they were pretty effective for a good stretch of the first half. But I really think that, like, if we focus on the positives here, didn't concede, which means we didn't concede on the first shot on goal because they did have 3 shots on goal, and then kept a clean sheet, and Ollie Watkins scored. So, like, the 3 things that we really were looking forward to happening all happened in this game. And we didn't give up a late goal either. So, like, win right there.
Into the run of 5 straight away defeats as well.
Yeah. So, and we close out Goodison Park with a win. So, like, a lot to be happy about. It sits us up well in the table. And, like, in terms of the game itself, there wasn't a whole lot I'd like to highlight because it was kind of, I don't want to say blah, but it wasn't the best game of soccer I've ever seen, best game of football I've ever seen. I thought Morgan Rogers' pass, like you mentioned earlier, to Watkins was, like, just spot on. And I think people are giving Watkins, I'm sorry, I saw some people saying Watkins, had a sitter there that he should have scored easily. And I agree that Pickford came out strangely, like he was in no man's land when that ball arrived. But I think it was a tougher chance than people are giving Ollie Watkins credit for. And to his credit, he did finish it. Like, now we're nitpicking the chances the guy finishes or whatever. Like, come on. I feel like at some point we just have to be happy that we got a ball in the back of the net, and it was Ollie's foot that put it in there.
People are probably looking at the 16th minute, right? He intercepts the pass from Ashley Young, bearing down on goal. He's got a lot of the right of the goal to shoot towards. Pickford, again, caught in no man's land, seemed to be a theme for him. And he had a lot of time to either chip him, bend it around, dribble it around. I mean, he could have done anything, and he wound up poking it wide. And so I think that's why
that's the
it
one.
felt like of 2 sitters, he got 1, 2 big chances. He only got 1. And so it perpetuates that narrative. But you're right. All he needs is the 1. And you saw the bellow that he released running to that corner flag.
Yep. Yeah,
that felt like a cathartic release to me for Ollie Watkins.
Yeah, I agree. And also, JJ should have had one too at the end of the first half. That was, that was like a really good chance, and he missed.
So that was it for me, and this was kind of a theme of the whole game, I suppose. Villa largely on top, not totally incisive.
Mm-hmm.
Everton gets their chances. They certainly had opportunities and just don't have a striker good enough to finish them.
Right.
And I was really worried at half. And frankly, as we approached full time and in the 90+2, Calvert-Lewin skies that one over the bar, that we were going to be made to rue the missed opportunities that we had in that first half. Yeah. Thankfully, we didn't.
Right.
But again, we are the lukewarm podcast, right? So we're feeling great. It was a big win, gets us up to 7th. We're tied with Man City on points, not on goal differential, Chris. We're only 2 points back at Chelsea, 3 back of Newcastle in 5th. But again, against a team that's down the table that you really should just kind of be putting to the sword, we were not without errors. And once again, a lot from former captain Tyrone Mings that just continues to reiterate the fact that he does not work in a play it out the back system.
Yeah, he struggled again. And it was Jacob Tanswell on Twitter who pointed out that Unai Emery was becoming vociferous in his pleading to get Tyrone Mings to open up and look left to release Dean. So what Alex has been highlighting specifically for the last couple of podcasts, because he was the one who pointed out to me, Alex did, you, Alex, that is. What Alex has been talking about the last few podcasts, we're seeing it sort of come to a head that Tyrone Mings just does not see that left side of the pitch for some reason. And it has led to, in this game, it led to some very awkward passes, either across the box or pass back to the keeper in awkward situations. So I don't know how you fix it because he's clearly not the player that you need right now for that role. But Pau Torres is out for at least another couple of weeks, so it's got to get fixed somehow, or you've got to adjust how you're going to play. But I don't see Unai Emery changing that because Luka Dean has been so effective this year.
It's such a tough debate because we're not going to sit here and say that Pau Torres hasn't been without his faults this season, right? We highlighted in the preview for Everton the fact that he was bullied by Dominic Calvert-Lewin for their second. Ultimately, it didn't cost us. But you look at this game, twice, 11th minute, Mings could release the ball left, doesn't, tries to cut it back, play it with his right foot to Emi Martinez. He needs to clear it out for a throw-in. 27th minute, the exact same thing happens. He can't play Dean, winds up cutting it back. Emi needs to clear it out again. There was another moment where he played a hospital ball to Ramsey, who ultimately wound up drawing a foul because he wouldn't play it wide. And then the 37th minute, the best chance that Everton got until the 92nd was because Dean made a run. Mings should have played him through, didn't, and he played it to Ramsey, who saw Dean make the run, went to go run with him, and so wasn't there. Miscommunication, ball winds up going back the other way, and thankfully Calvert-Lewin shoots it right at Emi's feet. But we've said before, like, there always is the Mings mistake. Unfortunately, I think the way that we're playing is now making that mistake plural. It's the Mings mistakes that wind up leading to good chances for the opposition. Like, thankfully, we haven't been punished on it too much yet, but it's coming. And we talk about Mings's ability to head the ball and, whatever, clear it out, like, certainly commanding presence. Let's also give credit to the fact that opportunity in the 92nd that Calvert-Lewin ultimately gets, it's because Mings doesn't effectively deal with the header. He winds up heading it backwards right onto, I forget the winger's name, but it was because he couldn't deal with the cross coming in. So you got to be effective somewhere.
Yep.
That's all I'm going to say.
Yeah, I thought if you were going to highlight something that was a struggle, it was Tyrone Mings' day today. He didn't have his best game, that's for sure.
The other thing I noticed that I want to point out is, why can we not play a through ball to Matty Cash? I don't understand. He makes a lot of great runs on the right-hand side, and I see so many opportunities to play him through where he could potentially beat the defender for pace. Ball comes in, defender coming across, and he's able to shoot it to get to the byline and ultimately play a cross in. And every time, I started this off by saying Kamara, great game, but whether it was Kamara, whether it was Yori, whatever, they always seem to play it a little short to him that makes him stop his forward momentum, stop his run, turn around, and cut it back. And it just defeats so many attacks. And I don't get why we just can't play a stronger ball out to the right side for him.
Do they assume he's slower because he's Polish? That he's not as fast as he is?
Just all the damn pierogies in his system.
Yeah. I don't know.
Did you notice that, or is it just me?
Yeah, no, I not to the extent that you did, but now that you mention it, yes, it stands out now. Well, I think that Matty Cash, and I've said this before, and I'm going to speak more in generalities here, but I think Matty Cash has been a very effective player for Villa this season by and large. He's not a perfect player by any stretch. And I do think that he had several opportunities today where he made very good runs, and the pass just didn't find him quite right. And I actually think that that's sort of been endemic of this whole season, not just with Matty Cash. For large stretches of the season, it looks as though Villa are just a tick off. Whereas last season in this part, or I guess prior to this part of the season, everything was clicking right. Everything looked great. They played beautiful football. So far this season, it has looked as though just the communication or the feeling or the intuition, whatever it may be, just isn't quite there. The connection between two players where we make the pass exactly where it needs to be and it doesn't get trapped under somebody's feet or something like that. Or if in the case with Cash today, where it just wasn't enough on the ball. I think that's been common throughout the season. And I don't know if it's an issue of all the injuries that we've had, new faces, new players, all that sort of stuff. I can't speak to why it's happening, but it's definitely been something that I've noticed throughout the year, not just today.
Great way to put it. I think Morgan Rogers kind of reiterated that or emphasized the same point in the post-match interview. If you saw that on TNT over there, he basically said they asked him, you're 3 points off of fourth, haven't quite got clicking. Like, how are you feeling about it? He's like, honestly, I don't even think we've played our best ball yet this year.
Yeah.
Something's always
time to start playing it.
We've got another level to get to. So I think that even the players are feeling what you're saying. But let's touch a couple good points before we move on. Like we said, this was a very professional performance, and that's why we don't really have like our sections of the matches today or a lot of things to analyze, because it was a lot of the same for 90 minutes, and Villa were ultimately able to see out a win on the road, midweek, tough game at the weekend. Like, that's something to be praised. It's sometimes throughout a year, if you're going to have a successful year, you're going to have games like that you just need to see out and win. And so that was great. Kamara, excellent again. Like you said, Ali got his goal. The other one that I want to highlight, though, is we've wondered for a while, what does Unai think of Emi Buendia? Before the beginning of the last season, he was playing really well. Earlier in this season, he got the first League Cup match, right? He came out as captain, and I think it says something that, again, today, cold night, midweek, Goodison, need 3 points, need to see it out. Only one sub was made, and it was Emi Buendia coming on.
Yep. I was kind of surprised there was only one sub with Arsenal coming up at the weekend. But yeah, I want to see Emi continue in this role, like we've talked about before. I think he's so dynamic as a player, and the more minutes he's able to get, the more effective he's going to be, I think. And I think to kind of piggyback on the point you made, I think it does mean that Unai Emery thinks a lot of Emi Buendia, that he would bring on Buendia before anybody else in this game. And so I'm glad for it, because I think he's such an interesting player to bring on the bench or off the bench. And I think that in games like this, where we, need to close out, potentially get another goal, something like that, he's a player that can be a difference maker off the bench for Villa.
I completely agree. Two other guys I want to highlight. Ezri Konsa, for nothing other than in the lead up to that goal, Morgan Rogers is going to get a ton of credit for the pass, Ali for the finish. But Konsa's ability to dribble and wriggle out of pressure to create that little give and go with Kamara to even make the sequence start, I had to rewind twice because I did not believe that it was Ezri Konsa just spinning and accelerating back there. I thought it had to be Yuri Tielemans or something way out of position, but it was Ezri Konsa. And that was, if we're going to highlight Mings not being great out of the back, that was great ability to play out of the back, play through the press, and you can see the opportunity that it created for us.
Yeah, I agree. They did highlight him on the NBC broadcast here. So like that, I'm glad for that. Like after they cut to Ali, then they cut to Rogers, and then they cut to Konsa.
You're right. They did do that.
Set it up. Yeah.
And the other one, before we get out of here with a couple last bad points, is Amadou Onana. Early bad and I would say unnecessary yellow card that he gave up on former villain Idrissa Gana Gueye. But to play the rest of the match and really only have one sequence where it was a dive, he was going down anyway, but it to get a little iffy at him potentially conceding another yellow card. Great job by him to manage the game, manage himself. Obviously a very physical player, didn't necessarily let that come in. And again, Unai Emery showing faith in his team and in his players to leave him in and not potentially make a different swap where Yori moves back or something of that sort, I think says a lot about the player that Amadou Onana is.
Yeah, I remain a huge fan of his. I thought he was very effective today. I thought the yellow was bad. There's no getting around that. It was an unnecessary, stupid yellow. But equally shameful dive in the attempt to get a second yellow. And the fact that the Everton players surrounded the referee about that, like that was ridiculous.
They knew it was their one shot to get something out of the match.
Yeah,
I think to get a red card and hopefully.
But yeah, I thought Onana played very well, and I think that, like we've talked about it before, people need to remember that he's only 23 years old. Like, he's very young, and we're out there asking him to do a lot. So this core looks like it's going to be in place for some time now, or could be in place for some time. It's an exciting thing to watch now as they come together.
I agree. One bad point that I have that I wanted to say, we looked fairly weak against corners. You saw one where Emmy went flapping at it. We had definitely one, potentially two different penalty shouts on different corners where I don't think it was a penalty, but I think it started to toe that line the way you saw his hand extend.
Yep.
And we are playing the team that essentially looks like they only score from corners next. So that has me a bit concerned.
Stoke City with a $700 million budget. Yeah, so I agree, though, because Arsenal have been very effective scoring from corners and set pieces in this season. And that is that's a negative trend. And yeah, I mean, Villa looked bad defending corners today. There were a handful that were just out and out scrambles in front of the goal mouth that, kind of made you sit there and go, so I don't feel great about it. And I thought that having Mings in there would at least shore us up on corners and set pieces some, because he's a bigger body and more physical than Pau Torres, but that it wasn't the case today. Let's hope it is on the weekend.
Better be. Anything else on your end for good points, bad points, or
no? I think we covered everything pretty well. Yeah.
All right. Well, in that case, let's hit the larger impact on the season. And as I said earlier, 3 more points, up to 7th. Behind Man City on goal difference, 3 away from Newcastle in 4th. And so we're starting to look back up the table again and think about other teams losing points. And so when we look down the line, in 2 match weeks, Manchester City and Chelsea play each other. So one of them is going to have to drop points. A draw would really help us to move up again. Obviously, we need to win as well to make that worthwhile. But the opportunity is there. We just got to seize it.
Chelsea, at least right now, appear to be losing steam. They have 2 points from their last 15, so they're not exactly picking up points left and right here.
I saw a stat today that over their last, whatever this Chelsea non-winning streak is, Nico Jackson has had an expected goal of like 8.6. He has scored none. Chris Wood, who has 13 goals, has had an expected goals of 8.5 all season long.
Had a banger on Tuesday too. I saw a little bit of that game.
Wild. I mean, we were saying before the last Chelsea match that Nico Jackson seemed to have figured it out, but maybe not.
Not so sure now, right? Yeah, not so sure at all.
But we're not here to talk about that London club. We're here to talk about a different London club, and that is Arsenal. So let's jump into our match preview. Away Saturday, 12:30 p.m. Eastern. We are on NBC here in the States. Arsenal so far this season. This year is not great by Arsenal's expectations. Yeah, they sit second with only 2 losses, but it has not looked great in a year where I think if you told 10 people at the beginning of the year Man City is going to have a massive drop-off, who's going to win the league, 8 of them probably would have said Arsenal, and the 2 that didn't probably were only Liverpool fans. So, a lot of draws. They're pretty off the pace. Until they beat Spurs today in a pretty even match against another team that's not looking great, They were winless in 3, draw to Brighton, which everyone does nowadays, 2-0 loss to Newcastle. Everyone loses to Newcastle nowadays. But the loss to United in the Cup was another not great one. So I can't say that Arsenal probably feels great about how they're looking so far this year.
No, I agree. And I think I think that, like, given where the expectations have been for them and are for them, it's so far been a disappointing season because they're so far off the pace, like you mentioned, and because by and large they haven't looked particularly good at any point this season. Now they have a ton of very good players, so they're going to pull out results. They'll get a win here and draw here and all that. They don't lose very much, but it's not like, I mean, to use an example, the team above them, Liverpool, right? Where Liverpool just came out and were playing gangbusters to start the season. And you sat and you watched them and you said, oh man, this is a really good football team. You don't feel that way about Arsenal. And that's not to say they're not effective and that they're not very good, because they are. They're near the top of the table for a reason. They've been there for the last few years. But their lack of finishing is now coming into major focus. And I think the cup game against United kind of was a real showcase of that, because in the second half, they had their chances in that game and just put none of them away. They didn't create anything in the first half, so you can't take that away from them. But the second half, I think they had like a 3.25 XG against Man United and didn't score. So I don't know. I don't know what that means for us, because I still think we have major issues that very good players, like the players they have, can exploit. But I do feel more confident than I think you would expect going into a game against Arsenal in London. And you also have to remember that Unai Emery is an extremely effective manager in London. He does very well there.
He does, but I think to that point, you're right. Even if you look at the match earlier this season, if you'll remember, we lost 2-0, but really this was one of Villa's better performances on the year. Ollie Watkins, as has been a theme for this year, had 2 atrocious misses in the first half. Borderline sitters that should have had Villa up 2-0 by halftime, home and host. Unfortunately, unlike today against Everton, we were made to rue those chances because we were playing a much better team. And so we talked a lot about in that match how Arsenal was set up to counter the counter. So they would turn the ball over deep in Villa territory. We were certainly playing further back. We would all race up the field, and they seemed to be kind of ready for that, trying to turn us over when everybody was going quick in one direction and then ultimately attack the space behind. And that's how they kind of drew us out. And it seemed to work, at least in the second half to a certain degree, but we still looked fairly comfortable for most of the match. And so Arsenal, it seems, has regressed in their exciting offensive play throughout the year. And I've got a couple stats to kind of prove that from that point. So as you kind of said, this is a team that certainly can make you rue your mistakes, but at the same time, this also is not the team that made us do that in the second, third match of the season, whatever it was. So, Chris, hear me out here. Few things. They're currently on pace to concede 34 goals over the course of the year. It's not a huge increase on last year. Last year, they conceded 29 over the course of 38 games. The big difference is the offense, like I just said. Last year, they scored 91 times in the league. This year, they're on pace for 74.
Yeah.
They've only scored 39 goals so far, and even that is being generous. They've scored 39 times from only an expected goals of 33. Now, we can say good finishers score more often, but the problem is Arsenal doesn't really have good finishers outside of Bukayo Saka, who's injured and not going to play.
Right.
And so you had Gabriel Jesus get hot for a few games. He's got a patella tendon injury or an ACL injury or something in his knee. He's not going to be playing. So you're relying on a lot of guys that haven't scored to continue an overproduction of expected goals to even get to 74 times in a year. You take those 5-6 off. when's the last time a team that only scored 66 times won the league, even came close to top 4? Didn't we score 66 and finish 4th last year or something in that realm?
Yeah.
So, they've really got to figure out the shooting boots soon. And when you look at their reliance on dead balls, like we said before, so again, 39 goals, or I guess it's 41 now because they scored 2 today.
Right.
10 goals have come from dead ball situations this year, really all corners. And in that research, stuff that comes from corners means that they've scored a goal within like 2 players of the corner coming in. So a Villa opportunity where you play it to short, who plays back to the corner guy, who plays it into somebody else, who plays it in, and then it heads to someone else, and then it goes in. That's a goal off a corner, but like it's not by these statistical metrics. So the 10 is probably even more than what that is kind of my point. And to show their reliance on it, Villa, who we typically think is good from corners and set pieces, 4. These are the 2 teams that we hold up as like great dead ball teams.
Yep.
And they're decimating us. It just shows how much they've perfected, credit to them, perfected it, but how reliant they are on it at this point in the season with the players that they have at their disposal.
I mean, they went like a week without scoring from open play, or 2 weeks without scoring from open play at one point, so it's interesting. The stark regression that you brought up in the research is worth noting. And I mean, some of it is like they are still lacking a striker that is really a great finisher, like you mentioned. I think they would love to get their hands on a guy like John Duran or something like that for about £30 million, apparently.
Attacking midfielder John Duran, not a striker, by the
way. I also think that some of it is because of the way they are setting up. They're going much more defensive in a lot of games. I did not get a chance to see their highlights from today, so I don't know how they look today. But there are times out there where they're playing 7 defensive players. They'll trot out an all defensive midfield. So 3 guys that play defensive mid sitting in the midfield. It's very negative football. And it's surprising given that they do have some decent attacking players. I mean, Saka being out is crushing because he's such a good player and he's so quick and he's such a good finisher, all those things. But it almost feels like to me something changed in the second Man City game last year where they both played that terrible game where everybody just stood around and didn't try to actually score goals. And I think that it seems like Mikel Arteta thinks that's the path. Play not to lose and you're going to be okay. And that will eventually lead to wins. That's just my read on it. But I think that they need to take a few more risks and throw more players forward, especially in games where, I mean, they have a better roster than pretty much the entire league outside of maybe 1 or 2 teams, go forward, attack, you'll be all right. It's shocking how little they're scoring from open play in particular.
I mean, is it too much to say that Arteta is kind of giving Mikel Mourinho vibes? The way that the negative football, he's angry in every press conference.
Yes.
There's all kinds of conspiracies against him. Now, he hasn't gone full Mourinho in throwing his own players under the bus. So credit to him, he defends his guys to the hilt. It's never their fault.
He always says they deserve to win no matter what happens. I know
you take issue with that, but so he hasn't gone that far on the Mourinho scale, but everything about him is pretty close.
Oh yeah.
And
I'm with you.
I want to hone in because I actually have one more stat that kind of proves your point that you said they're crying out for a striker like a John Duran. And we talked about how they've overperformed their expected goals already this year. A lot probably due to the corners. Only 8 times this year have they had an expected goal lower than 1 in a game. Usually they generate enough opportunity to score at least 1 goal. And we're talking about how they don't finish enough. They're not attacking. And 7 of those 8 actually came within the first 9 Premier League match weeks of the season, including Champions League ties. But like pretty early on, since then, they've been rolling nonstop with 1, 2, 3, whatever, but they haven't had someone to finish it.
Yeah.
And that is the biggest problem. You would say that they've figured their offense out, but like we saw the goal numbers. So like something's not adding up there.
Right.
And I think we know what it is.
I mean, but you have to figure, like, I guess the question and this is going to come back to bite me, but like, does Kai Havertz have the yips? Like, at this point, he missed the penalty in the cup game. He's looked ineffective. I don't know what's happening there. I know, like, no one's ever said, "Oh, Kai Havertz is such a great finisher," but like, this is crazy. And I brought up the cup game and the XG because in the second half they created a ton of chances, almost nothing, almost zero in the first half. But they were the much better side in the second half, and still weren't able to finish. And then crucially missed a penalty, to lose them the game. So you have to wonder if there isn't pressure building inside that locker room now about it. So, and that can go one of two ways, right? Like that can push you to become, where you're supposed to be and work hard, practice, work on, and then overcome that mental barrier, or it can do the opposite and you shrink. And it'll be interesting to see how they go the rest of the season. Because right now, I think it's pretty rocky for them based on their set of expectations. Pretty much anybody else would be thrilled with a season like this, to be in that top 3, top 4. So I'm only measuring it against what they thought and what pretty much everybody thought they were going to be this season.
Yeah, I think you picked them as league winners. Kai Havertz is an interesting one, and I'll need an Arsenal fan to gut check me on this, but when they bought him from Chelsea, I think the intention, at least that they said in the media, was to move him back to the role that he played so well in Germany, which was more as like a number 8, number 10, move him back into the midfield, let him create a little more where he's not responsible for scoring all those goals. And yet here we are a year and a half later, and he's playing number 9 again. And I don't really understand why that was the case. You have Gabriel Jesus. Arteta has literally spent $1 billion on transfers, and you're telling me that nowhere in that billion could you find a number 9 to put up there? Like, I don't. So to be fair to him, this has never been his game. Finishing has never been his game. We knew from the failed Chelsea experiment that he was not a center forward, and yet he keeps being asked to play this. It's kind of like if Villa had, to a much lesser scale, but remember when we had the striker crisis and we were lining up Anwar El Ghazi as our number 9 for a couple matches in a row, and that guy actually could finish. Yes. But can you imagine if we had to persist with that for a whole half a season? I think that's what they're kind of dealing with Kai Havertz. So if we're talking about guys that we're keeping an eye out for, it's not really him. I mean, maybe he'll make us eat our words, but like it's not him. It's Martinelli, who I know creates a lot of frustration amongst Arsenal fans. And it's Raheem Sterling, who's come in a little bit as that Saka replacement and played decently in a couple matches. He hasn't gotten all 5 since Saka got injured. But I'm really looking at what they can generate out of those wide guys because, like I said, I'm not expecting Havertz to punch them in. If they're going to score goals, I think it's going to need to come from them too. And then, I mean, of course, Martin Odegaard in the middle. Right.
Yeah. You said it perfectly. They have a ton of very effective, very good players. They're weaker without Saka, and no one would argue they aren't because he's one of the best players in the world. The lack of finishing is a concern for them. But the question I think that we need to ask, or that we need to consider, is given that Villa give up chances pretty regularly, including today, where they gave up two chances. One was an absolutely huge chance, right? Is this an opportunity for Arsenal to maybe break that habit and put a few in the back of the net because of Villa's propensity for giving up big chances?
Probably.
Uh,
But tell me what you would do to hopefully neutralize that threat.
I mean, I think you know where I'm going to go if we're talking tactics. I'm going to dominate the midfield with Onana and Kamara together. Tielemans at the 10, but then the idea maybe being that he can sit a little deeper if he needs to in spots. But yeah, so I'm putting Kamara and Onana together again. At the back is going to be the tougher question, because clearly Diego Carlos is out. He said on Instagram today, "I'm not injured."
Yep.
So he's not ever going to play again for Aston Villa. I would be shocked, so you're left with Mings and Konsa, and that leads to the Mings mistake. I would stick with Luka Dean and Matty Cash, but and then up top, it's going to be Duran for me, with Rodgers, Tielemans, and Bailey behind him.
What I want is the lineup that you just said.
Yeah.
What I think will happen is that we will see Ramsey again and we will see Ollie Watkins up top. I don't think that Ollie is getting benched the game after he scores a goal. But I also think that this is precisely the kind of game that he's not going to find success in, because I think that even more so than the first time that we played Arsenal, his opportunities are going to be limited. They are going to be difficult. And I just don't feel confident that if he only gets one chance in a game, that he's going to finish it. And so I think that could potentially be our undoing. So back to front, Emmy, same back four as you, Cash, Konsa, Mings, Dean, Onana and Kamara, Yori in front of them, Rodgers left, Ollie center, and then I think that Ramsey left, Ollie center, Rodgers right, is I think what Unai is going to do.
Yeah.
Tactics wise, I think we'll actually see something fairly similar to what we did today. I thought Kamara did a good job dropping into that back three, which gave us a little more solidity. You get Tielemans and Onana in front of them, so you get that nice kind of back five curved shape. And then Rodgers can kind of float middle. You just need him to not turn the ball over. If he can hold on to it,
that'll be key.
Yeah, that'll be key. Rodgers turnovers and avoiding the Mings mistake. And if we can do that, defend our corners well, there is a chance.
Yeah.
But I'm looking for a slow build up when there isn't something on. But otherwise, honestly, tactically, I'd like us to play. I just talked about like protecting everything, but offensively, I think you can play a little bit riskier, a little bit more vertical, try and break the lines a little bit more, get some long diagonals to Cash. Someone, for the love of God, please play Luka Dean through or over the top to get across in, because I think those long through balls are going to be where we can potentially break this defense down. And at least if they're running at their own net, you got the best chance to create some problems, because if Gabriel and Saliba can keep the whole game in front of them, like, you're not getting through that. Yeah. You're just not.
Yeah. What about, is Malen going to be available? We haven't talked about him yet. Is he going to be available?
So according to Twitter, fairly reputable sources, yes, he will at least be available.
Now, I don't think he's going to start, but
he's not starting. But he could be an interesting option off the bench. I think that, we didn't get into this, but I think bench Duran, Maatsen, and Malen potentially have some speed. little bit of chaos. Like I said, I want to play those long balls to try and take advantage of the space in behind when they move up the pitch. I think those are three guys that could really create something for us. So
that's why I thought Maatsen and Mullen off the bench, they have a connection already. We've seen
True.
it, when they played together, and they would, I think, could potentially be effective in executing that strategy of playing a long ball forward, because we know Maatsen's ability, and it looks like Mullen has a pretty good connection with him, where he's able to he played his best ball when he was playing with Maatsen behind him.
I agree.
Yeah.
So score?
I'm going to go 2-1 Arsenal.
I am going to go 1-0 to the Arsenal.
Okay. Yeah. So
both of us, no points coming out of North London.
Yeah.
That's fine. We've been
Hopefully
wrong.
We're wrong.
Yeah. We always say, hopefully we're wrong when we predict this, but we got to keep it honest. All right. So with that, we've got a fairly long infiltrating the Villarati here today. We just kind of started the first one. Daniel Malen official, 20 some odd million plus add-ons. Obviously, Philogene today has officially confirmed left, so we got Malen for less than Philogene. Chris and I love that. If you want an analysis on Daniel Malen, the player, we've got actually a clip of our previous statistical analysis of him up on YouTube, so go check that out. You can see it across all our social platforms. It's pinned and posted, and obviously on our YouTube page. So we won't waste anybody's time with that again. Don't totally get it, but we have faith in Unai, and we certainly think he's a good player.
Yes, that's the perfect way to put it. Yeah.
Ashkan, official. He will be staying on loan at Kasımpaşa for the rest of the season, as we anticipated, much like we did when we bought Ned. We'll do more here in the offseason. No use in analyzing a player who's not playing for us. So
it was George, by the way, my dog. He wanted to bark. He just wanted to make an appearance.
Love Georgie. You got everybody making an appearance over there.
I know.
Right? Now, before we get to the latest with John Duran and put everybody's minds at ease, let's actually, since we just mentioned Ashkan, talk about more defenders. So Mingueza links seem to be drying up. Supposedly 3 teams in on him, and we're third. Doesn't feel likely. We're seeing a lot more right back options sort of pop up. Release clauses being triggered, all that kind of stuff. When something seems more firm, we'll cover it then, or more likely over the next 2 weeks. Chris will cover it then. But new center backs are popping up every day. The Silva link seems to have gone cold, but the latest one that seems fairly progressed is Loic Bade, the French center back from Sevilla, 24 years old. Chris, correct me on my French pronunciation there.
No, I think you got it. Yeah.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah.
Good player, strong in the tackle. Supposedly was rumored at a 50 million euro release clause, but it seems like the latest offer from Villa is around 15 plus 5. Sevilla wanted 21 plus 5 plus Carlos on loan. Fab says that's not happening because, as we said earlier, Carlos is leaving. There's supposedly a lot of clubs interested in him. A couple out of Turkey have made their interest concrete. So how high does Villa go? How low is Sevilla willing to go? Chris, what do you think about Loic Bade?
So from what I've seen, he looks very good. I can tell you that like Sevilla fans love him and think that he's an extremely effective player. So like I don't always put too much in that because everybody hated Yuri Tielemans at Leicester, and Daniel Malen is not exactly getting rave reviews in his time now in Germany. But like he looks like another young, strong player that we can build around. So again, this sort of looks to me like a classic Unai and Machi move to get someone relatively young, relatively cheap, and try and take advantage of a situation where the market may be a little softer than Sevilla thought, and we may be able to get them for a little bit less than expected.
Yeah, actually, someone on ESPN, I sent you it. Was it Sam Ty or Gab Marcotti? Gab Marcotti had it. Great
Yeah.
piece on ESPN. Everybody should go read on essentially deflation in world football. And I think that's kind of what's coming into play here. He actually mentions the Mullen deal as one of those. But here's my take. Bade, we should say, right-footed player, so probably more an Ezri Konsa competitor than a Tyrone Mings and Pau Torres competitor. He is on 20,000 less a week than Diego Carlos. Now, granted, moving to the Premier League, he's probably going to expect some kind of a raise. So let's say that they're on equal money, right? Mm-hmm. 24 years old. What I would probably describe him as is almost like an Ezri Konsa with Pau Torres passing ability. He could be the best of both worlds. And this is why. I compared him in a couple different ways to both Pau Torres and Diego Carlos this season on a per 90 basis. I compared him to them last year when Villa was playing a lot better and both those players were playing a lot better. And then I also looked at him compared to Pau Torres the last year that Pau Torres played in Spain, so that we could kind of see against similar competitions what it would look like. Mm-hmm. Now, Loic Bade, his passing stats are 66th percentile or above compared to all center backs this season. 84th in long passes attempted, but he's also 96th percentile in tackles, 88th percentile in tackles won. And then when you look at him against Pau Torres, both with Villa and when Pau Torres was in Spain, not a huge difference there. Passes attempted, passes completed, passing percentage, all seem to be fairly consistent. Like, I'm talking Pau Torres has 1,500 over a season and he's at like 750 now halfway through the year. So like right on point. Right on. Obviously much higher than Diego Carlos. But here's the difference. He wins over twice as many tackles, at least 150% of what Carlos does. Where he's different is that he doesn't progress the ball via the dribble. We talked about how Pau Torres dribbles the ball into midfield and then releases. That's been a hallmark of his entire career. Loic Bade doesn't dribble the ball at all. He touches the ball about as much as Diego Carlos does. So keep that in your mind. Yeah. The big difference is that they mostly play that middle range pass. What he doesn't do is the Pau Torres 30-yard long pass to really break the lines. So range a little more limited, but the amount that he's going to try is going to be similar. But then you add in the tackling ability of an Ezri Konsa, Tyrone Mings, whatever, an ability to win. The reason why I said he wasn't quite as defensively stout as Tyrone Mings is his aerial ability. He's strong. He's fine. But his aerial duels won is like 67th percentile. So not like blowing it out of the water. So like I said, profile of player, Ezri Konsa on the ground, maybe Ezri Konsa in the air, but at least a similar range of passes attempted to Pau Torres. I think the two of them, honestly, as a center back pairing, could work really, really well moving forward. Yeah. And whether it becomes we figure out how to make Ezri Konsa a right back, we move to three at the back, he and Ezri Konsa are just rotating every so often. I think it's a really good option that most importantly gives us something different and something that, as much as you and I think that he's probably unfairly maligned, something that Diego Carlos just simply cannot and will not be able to do. Right.
He's not going to fit that mold ever. And so I think I would be considering this now as rotation, because right now we really don't have an effective option. Well, we have Carlos, but not offensively, right? We don't have, especially without Pau Torres out there now. We don't have an effective option to spell Ezri Konsa and still create out of the back the way that we like to do. So I think this is rotation and squad depth. And then long term, probably the move is to make him your starting center back. But for now, it's going to be, I think, perfect for what we need today.
I agree. Now, before we get on to the fun stuff, let's talk about John Duran. Everybody's interested in him. Rumored £100 million pound valuation on him now, which essentially means there's no chance in hell that we're selling him. What I want to speak about is the fact that the English press, everybody that's tweeting about this, is pulling headlines from reports coming out of Colombia that are saying that Dortmund is asking about him, West Ham is submitting a bid, PSG are inquiring about him. What no one in England will translate and actually report on, I've looked at these in the know guys, these kick streamers, and these official journalists. I've read it all in Spanish. Again, I'm Colombian. They all end with some version of John Duran is happy and comfortable in Birmingham with Aston Villa. He does not want to move. All that we are saying is that his value continue and his profile continue to grow. And so it is inevitable that teams are going to ask for his services. And that is completely understandable. It makes sense. But I don't want this media narrative to continue to be that like John Duran and his agent are agitating for a move, because in this case, they're literally not. Even the people reporting this are being very clear about the fact that they are not, that he is fine and happy at Aston Villa. So like, let's put this to bed. PSG only valued him at 55 million. West Ham's bid was only 40 million. And
that's insulting, by the way.
Dortmund has never spent 50 million on a player, let alone 100. So like, he's not going anywhere.
Right. No. And Unai said today he wants to keep both Ali and John Duran for the next 10 years, which would put Ali at 40, yep. At that point. So I don't know if it's going to be that, but I will just continue to say having two good players is a good thing. Having two good strikers is a good thing.
I completely agree. So, Chris, two fun ones to close this one out. Let's see how long I can get you ranting about this one. So I'm going to turn this one over to you. We've all heard on Twitter about Max and Piegate and Dan Bardell and this growing divide, and I would say more vocal chorus of anti-moaners against these people that we've been talking about on the podcast for a while, that seem to want the club to strike this needle of being extremely local and homegrown and a charity, and people who understand that football and being in Champions League is a business.
Yeah.
And they're being like these people that almost want to have both.
Yeah. Yep. So Piegate.
So go off, King. Go off.
So Piegate is the really what started all this. Max from Villa on Tour, which is a hugely successful podcast and vlog. They've come to America a handful of times. They came to Philadelphia, the game that I was at a couple years ago. He had a pie, one of the $1.50 steak pies that was available at the ground for the FA Cup game, and it was served cold. And he recorded a vlog about it and complained about it, and this set off like a firework on Villa Twitter, and you very quickly saw two camps, like you said. Now, I understand that his pie was cold. If his pie was cold, like, return it and get another pie, say, hey, this is cold. Can I have another one? And I'm sure the answer would be probably yes. Because to add to Piegate, a West Ham fan, traveling away fan, tried the pie and it was hot. And you could see the steam on his video. And this is what's happening on Villa Twitter right now, is people are sending these videos back and forth to each other. And we are fighting about pie while our team is probably going to go through to the automatic stage of the knockout round of the Champions League. We're talking about pie.
We don't know how to handle success, Chris.
Just like, and you've got Dan Bardell, like, literally tweeting at every single former villain, like, can you believe you weren't there for the 150th anniversary? So I just, like, at that point, when you're doing stuff like that, it feels like you're just trying to rile people up, and he probably is. People do stuff for clicks. I get it. It's not really my thing, but it. I know that he has to make a living, but this seems silly now. And again, the team is doing pretty well, both on the pitch and off, in my opinion. you're never going to be able to strike the perfect balance that people want, where the club is Champions League, European Cup winners, etc., and then also has no, tourist fans, quote unquote, has no, no price increases. Game day programs are $1, a pound, and all this stuff. But you also have state of the art hospitality facilities and all these things like this. You can't have both. You can have
Chris, the programs at £1.50 didn't even appease everybody, because apparently they've got to pay £3 for postage.
heck out. Clearly,
a program here, if you go to a game, especially a commemorative game like that, program's probably $20-$30.
Don't you think that Chris Heck should control postage better? No, isn't that what this really is about?
I would have. It's £1.50, £3. Okay, it's £4.50.
Yeah,
I would buy 10 of those for the price that it would cost me to get like 2 Super Bowl ones here of the biggest game in the sport.
Yeah, I think I've made it pretty clear that I'm not saying the club is above reproach. I'm never suggesting that.
No.
But I do feel like now we have a few very vocal people that just are targeting the club to complain about anything. And it's always, I think, going to go back to Chris Heck needs to go. And that's the problem, is that an American is in charge of the revenue, and we can't have that. We need an Englishman in there. And I do think that's the genesis of this.
You're probably right. I've got nothing else to add, so let's end on the best one. And Chris, tell me about the rightward lean of Lazio, and I'm not talking about the fascist nature of their ultras. I am talking about the lean of a certain member of the club.
Former member of the club, Alex. Everyone's probably heard this story by now, but Lazio has a falconer who trains the eagle that they let fly before games. I think the eagle's name is Olympia. His name is Juan Bernabe, and he has been fired from his job with the club because he posted a picture on his private Instagram, his personal Instagram, in which he celebrated the success of a surgery, Alex. Now, you may say to yourself, why is that a big deal? Why does that get you fired? Because it was a penile implant.
Your fingers, right? That's what it was. It's really, really weird to elongate your fingers.
It was a penile implant surgery. And just to clear up, Alex, where you went, he wasn't trying to elongate anything. And I have a direct quote. He had
circumference was his foot.
No, see, you're way off. You're way off. All right.
Ooh.
Mr. Bernabe had his member fitted with a prosthesis that has a device whereby he can press a button that allows him to perfectly control an erection and the duration. So it wasn't about extension or anything like that. It was about control.
Is he just going like, look, ma, no hands, boom.
I would appreciate if you don't step on my journalistic integrity here. One thing that I would like to note is that he posted this video or picture the day after Lazio's 125th anniversary celebration. So, like, clearly Chris Heck missed the trick here, because that's how you celebrate 125 years, right? Like, we didn't have anybody getting a penile implant for 150. What's
Dan
Chris
Bardell working
over
out
there?
Come on, we need it.
So yeah. Now Mr. Bernabe has been unreachable thus far. Just for the record, I've tried to reach out. to see if he would like to come on the pod. He has appeared on an Italian radio show. I'm not sure if he speaks English, and I slept through 2 semesters of Italian, so I don't know that we'd be able to conduct an interview, but I'm going to try. Now, the other thing that I would like to point out is this is not the first time he ran afoul with the club. In 2021, he was suspended for cheering Mussolini on a big screen at the club. So I have tried to do some background details into this because I don't fully understand it. I know that Lazio has some hardcore right-wing extremist ultras, but how does Mussolini come up like on a screen, and then you start cheering for him? And he apparently did like a pro Mussolini chant. So just to put things in perspective, all right? Cheer for a dictator who aligned with Hitler, suspension. Penile implant surgery picture, you're out.
And so, Chris, I want to be very, very clear for our listeners. You have uncovered and seen said picture.
So only blurred. That's the thing. So he
okay. So we
Instagram,
need to invest in a descrambler.
He made his Instagram private. I have tried to connect with him. I'm hoping when I sent it to him, it was probably 9:00 Italy time or so. 10:00 Italy time. So he may not have seen it yet. I am hoping that by the next pod, where you will not be here, I will have a full report for you, our listeners and viewers. But no, only like you literally cannot find the non-scrambled picture anywhere. And I looked. I'm not too proud to say.
We're gonna get banned from YouTube for platforming a pedophilic racist.
It's been a fun ride.
Yeah, and
that is the news I bring you as a journalist.
Like technically, there is no evidence of pedophilia. I am just speculating wildly on a rumor that I may or may not have read on the internet.
But he does love Mussolini. That much we do know.
He is, yes, he is a fascist. Great. Well, Chris,
how's that?
I know that I and our listeners very much appreciate your investigative work, your journalistic integrity, and everybody, please stay tuned to your feeds as we produce more content and updates about automatic erections in Italy.
We will do this for as long and as hard as we need to.
But so will he.
All he's got to do is push a button.
Well, I don't really have a close out of that. I'm just going to push my own button to play the music and get us out of here. So,
up
Chris,
the villa.
Been great. Up the villa. Hi, Mom and Dad.